Yeah, day 11, and just this gentleman is interesting. He went to MIT, so he's a very smart individual, very educated and very eloquent. And one of the things that I'm interested in and having a discussion about with the minimum wage in Western countries, one of the challenges is, and when I was doing material process engineering, we could send logs for 17 cents an hour to be milled and worked in Indonesia. And so that's what happens. Our logs get cut down and straight to the port and off they go. So imagine if a country like New Zealand didn't have the minimum wage, and what we did is we had zones where people who work for $1 a day, for example, so you can actually get things like my chestnuts. I'd love to get them picked for $1 a day, and people get to take home the chestnuts. They don't have to work here all day, but at least they were able to pick something, and then they were able to probably get the minimum wage and the value of the chestnuts, but it only costs me $1 to have that harvest done for the day per person, for example, but they then get, the value of the product. Anyway, I don't want to go too far into it, but rather than having the minimum wage, wouldn't it be good to have locations around New Zealand where the various countries of the world's pay rates or pay rates for that activity are paid? And so if you want to go to a place that pays a lot, a country that pays a lot for that product to be picked, so it just, I suppose it's something that we used to have in the old days where it costs a lot more in the city. People were saying to go to concerts, pay $60 for parking. What? Parking your car when you go into a city? Anyway, let's listen to this guy.
On right and early. And all the respectable people, like Nancy Pelosi telling people, please go to Chinatown to celebrate the Chinese New Year. Bill de Blasio of New York saying, despite coronavirus, get out there. Don't lead your lives. Don't let this thing hold you back. These people need to resign. Nancy Pelosi should resign. It's one thing to say we don't have enough information about this. It's another thing to say, take the information that's coming in, disregard it, and get back in there and keep fueling the economy. This is exactly our leadership class, their problem. They think about this in short-term economics. The long-term implications of us all sheltering in place, nobody can compute the consequences of this. Not one person in the world knows what happens when you run this experiment.
Yeah, it's a new thing, right? The Made in America argument was always like sort of frivolous, almost xenophobic. Like, why do you want things made in America? What do you care? Do you not like people from other countries? Do you not want to buy things from other countries? It was like this made in America thing was like people disregarded it in a lot of ways. But when you realize that all of our medical supplies, like so much of our electronics, so much of all the stuff that you need to kind of keep things exactly the way they are, it's cheaper to make it over there. Because they will, like what we saw with Foxconn, where they put nets around the building to keep people from jumping off. And the weirdest thing was people trying to argue that the suicide rate at Foxconn was essentially the same as the suicide rate in the general population.
Well,
have you ever heard that argument?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's where they work. There's nets around where they work because so many people where they work jump off the building to end their life because their life sucks that bad that they kill themselves at work. Do you know how rare it is to kill yourself at work? Probably pretty fucking rare. You know how common it is where you have to put nets around the building? You're like, look, we're getting really tired of people going to the roof and jumping off because it's the easiest way to kill yourself. They're going to get more creative.
Yeah, the problem is we are all hooked up to this need for cheap products, profits, when we can't figure out how to innovate enough to actually create the juice in our own system. And therefore, we have to rationalize. You were going to say?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, also, we've gotten into this idea of every year we have to have a newer, better piece of electronics. Like, if you had to go the rest of your life with an iPhone 11, how much would you suffer?
Not that much, although I would say that many of us are not that excited about the next phone. That itself is an antiquated thing.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, why can't they make it so that you can just fix this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, who the fuck fixes their phone? You don't fix your phone. You bring it in.
Oh, you're going back to like Depression era thinking.
Well, not Depression era thinking. It's like, why can't things be sustainable?
No, the planned obsolescence and the need to constantly update so that you never. It's a tricky problem. If you need growth to power your system, then in a weird way, it makes sense not to build the optimal phone.
Right.
Because if you were to build the optimal phone and then people stopped renewing everything,
your system's fucked.
Then your system weirdly breaks down. So it makes sense at the level of the phone that you wouldn't want to do that. But weirdly, in aggregate, if you can't start innovating, if you can't figure out how to restart innovation in a big way, now you're stuck with either having to learn to live in steady state, which none of us, Americans have no program for living in steady state. We need growth. That was the whole point of the embedded growth obligation idea, that it's suffused throughout every institution. Every pension plan assumes growth, right?
Right.
All right, so now we have this problem.
You know, I've dealt with high IQ people for the last 2 decades. Mensa's sort of like 1 in 40, 1 in 50 in a room has a 140 IQ or above. And the psychometric test to test them, you can then create a test for 1 in 100. So people that are in the top 1% of the population could be tested. But smart people were able to then work out, well, hang on a minute, we can do 1 in 1,000. Now, in the old days with the army, they wanted to find out anyone that has sort of an 84 IQ or lower in the army is net. It costs more. And I'll give you an example. If you have someone that has lower IQ, like the McNamara and morons in Vietnam, what happens is that you can train them to throw a hand grenade, for example, pull a pin and throw the hand grenade. But a person with that lower IQ, and I'm not saying it's 70 because they can't even work out their birth date from when they were born to what the date is now. They can't do the maths of working out how old they are. But what they found is that a person with a low IQ, it's impossible for them to throw a hand grenade and lob it in an arc. They can't hold the idea of an arc in their head to then get the hand grenade in the hole. So you'll train them up and then throw, and they'll always look at the hole and throw it directly at it, and of course it falls short and bounces them back, and all sorts of problems there with hand grenades bouncing back when they're live. So that's why the army needed to have an IQ test to make sure that the people that were lower than 84 weren't getting drafted. But then on the other end of the scale, the average professor is 150 IQ. The average PhD or doctor is 125.
Problem where we don't have the growth and we need the growth. And then in a weird way, the planned obsolescence is like fake growth. It means that we're going to rebuy our phones even as if they were now highly innovative. So there's like a weird way in which we become dependent on nonsense.
Yeah, dependent on nonsense is a great way to put it. And this is really highlighting that for a lot of people. When people are home and they're with their families and they're not traveling, especially people like me and my peers, like a lot of my comedian friends who travel constantly, we're like, it's kind of nice to be home. You know, everyone's sort of re-looking at this like, is this life that we've sort of accepted as this?
Yeah, it's the old gerbil on the running around in circles. So he's a comedian. He travels to do shows at various locations. A few people come into an environment for the night to watch his show, and then they go back again. And that's what they're chasing. And so when they're at home, they spend time with family and get to know into a routine. Yeah.
This is the way things are. Is this really the way things should be? Or is this just, we just got caught in a pattern and we're operating on momentum?
If our comedian force becomes non-dysfunctional, we are screwed.
Well, that's not going to happen.
Did you hear what he said? Non-dysfunctional, our comedians. No. This guy here is a great intellect. MIT does get... And the people that go to MIT, they're not lawyers and that sort of thing. They're more focused on the STEM, engineering and science and technology and maths.
That would require so many psychedelic trips.
There's almost no group that is as far away from normal as comedians.
I know, that's why I get along with them so well. It's so hard for me to hang out with regular folk. That would be rough. Like if I had to live in a community of regular people that just work every day.
What if you had like a community of only comedians? What would that look like?
Oh, that'd be fine.
Really?
Yeah, it would be fine. We have that. That's the Comedy Store.
So the Comedy Store.
Yeah, if the Comedy Store was just locked down on like a 500-acre piece of property and there's a bunch of houses on there,
We could only do jokes for each other.
We would just entertain each other. Well, half the fun of comedians is just us hanging out. We would just get together and laugh.
Well, by the way, I should just say, one of the great things about moving back to LA has been your invitations to come hang with the comedians at the store. What a great scene. I mean, you made this point to me about a renaissance, and then I think I sent you David Byrne's book about music, the chapter on CBGB, and it's almost an exact map of what CBGB did as the Harvard of punk to the Comedy Store's Oxford of comedy.
Yeah, you've been to the back bar.
That's the
Holy Grail.
Well,
that's the spot.
You got me hammered.
Look, I'll leave it there. Look, you can watch these interviews. All I'm doing is using an entertaining format in my isolation to share things I've thought about in the last 50 years and developed. So progressive taxation was the earlier video that I talked about, day 11. It seems to be quite productive, actually, day 11 into this crisis, and also having access to the brightest minds out of America. It's only going to get stronger and harder. Like talking about Nancy Pelosi retiring, or not retiring, but resigning over making poor decisions, or him saying that they're not as creative in the States to actually come up with a way to juice their economy so that they're not reliant on outsourcing it to low-wage economies, and now they're caught in a situation where they can't get antibiotics or crucial things for their everyday lives because things are broken down. And so that's our political class. There's this holding pattern, innovation. It's easier for a person that holds power to say no to someone that's trying to be innovative. We see it with Bruce Simpson out at the airfield wanting to teach electronics and learning how to fly micro drones and that sort of thing. And we've just watched for year after year of him with the council. And it's a fascinating car wreck in slow motion happening, and now it's happened at a global level, what's been happening to Bruce. Anyway, there's going to be the iceberg melts on top and then it rolls over and the bottom comes up to the top, and we're just in that place where scientists now, people love scientists, and even Donald Trump, the woman that is part of the pandemic they present, I think Donald enjoys the bright mind of this woman, and you can see from their body language that interaction happening, and I think that's a fascinating love story if there was one unfolding in all of this.
Times ago, and I stumbled out of that thinking, that was the best time I could remember anything.
Well, you know what's great too? Even when non-comedians like yourself and, Melissa and Matt and, some of their friends and all these other people come there and they're around these people, they act freer. They're laughing louder. They're making, more off-color jokes, and everyone's just laughing, having fun. I mean,
Melissa's the worst. You have to be very careful.
She's hilarious. Yeah. She's very funny. Yeah. Melissa Chen, by the way. Shout out to Melissa.
By the way, what great stuff she's doing on masks.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, she just takes it on herself to ask the question, why don't our doctors and nurses have masks? And so she's running around trying to figure out how to connect donors, flights, product. Whatever she's doing, she's heroically taking a ton of this on her shoulders and not. I'm hesitating because I don't even know what I'm allowed to say.
Right. Yeah, we don't have to talk in front of
you should.
She's a very interesting person. I'm really glad you introduced me to her. She's fascinating. This is a great time to see what people are actually made out of.
Yeah, who's heroic? The heroic impulse.
Sure, and who can keep their shit together when things go sideways, when things get Western, as it were.